The line in the sand, the emergency beacon from New Geneva colony, screamed across the void for 3 days before Captain Sarah Chun's patrol ship, the Meridian, picked up its signal. By then, it was already too late. Sarah stood in the command center of her vessel, watching the colony grow larger on the main screen. Something was wrong. No lights flickered in the residential sectors. No traffic moved between the landing platforms. The massive mining operation that had made New Geneva humanity's most prosperous outer rim settlement sat silent as a tomb. Captain, her communications officer, Lieutenant Torres, called out with a trembling voice. I'm getting readings from the surface. There are ... bodies. Thousands of them. Sarah's jaw tightened. She had seen war before, had fought in the border skirmishes with the Helix Confederation 2 years ago. But this felt different, colder, more deliberate. Take us down, she ordered. Full scan of the area. I want to know what happened here. The Meridian descended through New Geneva's atmosphere, passing over what used to be thriving agricultural districts. Sarah watched through the viewport as the scope of the massacre became clear. Entire neighborhoods had been reduced to ash. The colony's defensive shields lay shattered, their generators still smoking for whatever weapon had torn through them. They landed at the main administrative complex, or what remained of it. Sarah led a small team through the ruins, their boots crunching on debris and glass. The silence was deafening. No survivors called out. No wounded begged for help. Just the wind whistling through broken walls. In the colony's central plaza, they found them. 15,000 colonists, arranged in perfect rows like some grotesque military formation. Men, women, children, elderly, all executed with surgical precision. Each body bore a single plasma burn to the chest. No panic, no chaos, just methodical extermination. Sarah knelt beside a small girl, maybe 8 years old, her blonde hair still braided with colorful ribbons. The child's eyes stared at nothing, her small hand clutching a toy spaceship. Sarah's hands shook as she closed the girl's eyes. Captain, Torres's voice crackled through her comm unit. You need to see this. Sarah found her communications officer standing before the colony's main data terminal. The screen displayed a message in multiple languages, but the meaning was clear in every one. The Corvani Syndicate claims this territory. Humans are no longer welcome. This is your only warning. The Corvani Syndicate. Sarah knew the name. Every human in the outer territories did. They were raiders, slavers, and conquerors who had spent the last decade carving up smaller civilizations across the Andromeda Spiral. Their ships were fast, their weapons brutal, and their leader, Warlord Zextar, was known for his complete lack of mercy. But they had never attacked human space before. There had been treaties, agreements, neutral zones carefully maintained to avoid exactly this kind of incident. Now 15,000 innocent people were dead, and it was clear the Syndicate considered those agreements worthless. Sarah transmitted her findings directly to Earth Command, her report cold and factual despite the rage burning in her chest. Within hours, every human colony, station, and outpost in the galaxy had received the news. The reaction was swift and unified. Director Elena Vasquez of the Human Defense Council stood before the emergency session of Earth's government, her usually calm demeanor replaced by something harder, sharper. The holographic displays around the chamber showed images from New Geneva, the bodies, the destruction, the message left behind like a signature on a work of art. They killed children, Vasquez said, her voice carrying to every corner of the packed chamber. They lined up families and executed them for the crime of being human. This was not war. This was not conquest. This was extermination, pure and simple. The chamber erupted in angry voices, demands for immediate retaliation, calls for mobilization. Vasquez raised her hand for silence. "The Corvani Syndicate believes humanity is weak," she continued. "They think we are soft, divided, unable to respond to their aggression. They have made a calculation that we will negotiate, that we will bend, that we will accept this atrocity as the price of peace." She paused, letting her words sink in. They are about to learn how wrong they are. Within the hour, a single message was transmitted on all frequencies, in every language spoken by the major galactic powers. It was simple, direct, and final. To the Corvani Syndicate and any who support them: you have crossed into human space and murdered our people. You have exactly 72 hours to withdraw all forces beyond the neutral zone and surrender those responsible for the New Geneva massacre. If you remain in our territory after this deadline, you will be destroyed. This is not a negotiation. This is not a threat. This is a promise. Humanity has spoken. Across the galaxy, other species watched and waited. The humans had always been oddly peaceful for such a young race. They traded fairly, honored their treaties, and preferred diplomacy to warfare. Many assumed this latest outrage would result in the usual pattern: angry words, economic sanctions, maybe a few skirmishes before both sides agreed to talks. Were wrong. Deep in the Sol system, in shipyards hidden behind Jupiter's largest moon, Admiral Marcus Kane received the activation codes he had hoped never to use. For 20 years, he had overseen humanity's most classified project, the construction of a fleet designed not for exploration or defense, but for total warfare. The ships were unlike anything humanity had built before. They were larger, faster, and carried weapons that violated half the galactic treaties on acceptable military technology. Each vessel was crewed by volunteers who had signed waivers understanding they might never return home. They called themselves the Silent Fleet, and they had been waiting for a day like this. Kane stood on the bridge of the flagship Nemesis, watching as dozens of identical vessels emerged from their hiding places. These were not explorers or peacekeepers. These were predators, built for one purpose: to teach the galaxy that humanity's mercy was a choice, not a weakness. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "the Syndicate has responded to our ultimatum." Kane nodded grimly. He had expected as much. The response came in the form of another attack. Titan Research Station, home to 3,000 scientists and their families, simply vanished from long-range sensors. When rescue ships arrived, they found only debris and a familiar message: humans learn slowly. Perhaps more lessons are needed, but this time the Corvani had made a critical error. They had attacked while Kane's fleet was already in position. Warlord. Zextar sat in his command throne aboard the massive dreadnought Bloodclaw, savoring what he assumed would be humanity's surrender. The humans had been predictably emotional about their dead colonists, but emotion without power was meaningless. Let them rage and threaten. The Syndicate had conquered 12 species in the past decade. These soft-skinned bipeds would be different. "Warlord," his sensor operator called out, "I'm detecting energy signatures at the edge of the system. Multiple contacts." Zextar leaned forward, his forearms clicking with anticipation. "Human reinforcements? Unknown configuration, sir. The signatures are strange. I've never seen anything like them." Before Zextar could respond, space itself seemed to tear open. Dozens of ships emerged from what appeared to be nothing, their hulls black as the void, their weapons already charging. They moved with a precision that spoke of perfect coordination, forming attack formations with mechanical efficiency. "Impossible," Zextar breathed. "The humans don't have this technology." But they did, and they had been waiting 20 years to use it. The Silent Fleet struck without warning, without mercy, and without hesitation. Kane's ships tore into the Syndicate vessels like wolves among sheep, their weapons designed specifically to counter Corvani shielding and armor. What should have been a battle became a slaughter. The Syndicate's commander aboard, the cruiser Death Scar, managed to transmit a single panicked message before his ship exploded. They're not fighting like humans. They're fighting like the transmission cut to static. Asterisk. In less than 6 hours, the Corvani force that had seemed so invincible was reduced to floating debris. Those ships that tried to retreat found their junk drives mysteriously failing, their engines going dead at the worst possible moments. The silent fleet had come prepared for every contingency. Warlord Zextar found himself alone on his damaged bridge, most of his crew either dead or fleeing in escape pods. Through the cracked view screen, he watched a human vessel approach, sleek, deadly, and completely undamaged despite the battle that had just ended. A communication channel opened, and Zextar found himself staring at a human face he would never forget. Admiral Kane looked exactly like what he was, a predator who had finally been given permission to hunt. "Warlord Zextar," Kane said, his voice calm and measured. "I am Admiral Marcus Kane of the Human Defense Fleet. You killed 15,000 of our people at New Geneva. You murdered 3,000 more at Titan Station. You declared war on humanity." Zextar tried to speak, to offer terms, to negotiate, but Kane continued as if he hadn't noticed. "Your fleet is destroyed. Your reinforcements will share the same fate. And now, Warlord, you're going to help us send a message to the galaxy about what happens when someone crosses humanity's line." The transmission ended. Moments later, Zextar's flagship exploded in a brilliant flash that could be seen from 3 systems away. Across human space, the news spread like wildfire. The Corvani Syndicate, the raiders who had terrorized the Outer Rim for a decade, had been crushed in a single engagement. Their fleet was gone. Their leader was dead. And the humans who had done it were not the peaceful explorers everyone thought. They knew. Director Vasquez stood before the cameras once again, but this time her message was not for her own people. It was for every alien power, every potential aggressor, every species that might be watching and wondering if humanity was truly as dangerous as it appeared. "Let this be clear to all who hear it," she said. "Humanity did not seek this war. We did not choose to become what we have become today. But when our people are murdered, when our children are slaughtered, when our peaceful nature is mistaken for weakness, we will respond with the full fury of our species." She paused, her eyes hard as steel. "The Corvani Syndicate is finished. Their fleets are destroyed, their leaders are dead, and their territories are now under human protection. To any who would follow their example, remember this day. Remember what happened when someone decided to test humanity's resolve." As her words echoed across the galaxy, the Silent Fleet began its next phase of operations. This time they were heading directly for Korvac Prime, the Syndicate's home world. The real war was just beginning. In the depths of space, Admiral Kane stood on his bridge and watched the stars. Somewhere out there, other species were learning that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their numbers. It was their ability to unite when threatened, to transform from explorers into exterminators. When their survival was at stake, the galaxy was about to discover that the quiet species from Earth had teeth. And once those teeth were bared, mercy became a luxury no enemy could afford. Asterisk, the price of arrogance. The Corvani home world of Korvac Prime had never known fear. For 800 years, it had been the heart of an empire built on conquest and terror. Its crimson skies reflected the light of 3 suns, and its massive cities sprawled across continents once belonging to extinct species. The planet's orbital defenses were legendary, layer upon layer of weapon platforms, shield generators, and automated defense drones that had repelled every attack in recorded history. None of that mattered when the Silent Fleet arrived. Admiral Kane stood in the yaw, command center of the Nemesis, watching as his ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, their faces showing no emotion as they prepared to end a civilization. They had learned their trade well in the months since New Geneva. The Syndicate's outlying colonies, their military bases, their slave worlds, all had fallen to humanity's methodical advance. Admiral, his tactical officer, reported, "Korvac Prime's defense grid is powering up. I count 347 weapon platforms, plus their planetary shield network." Kane nodded. Intelligence had predicted as much. Begin phase 1. The first wave of the attack came not from weapons, but from something far more insidious. Humanity had spent decades studying alien technology, learning its weaknesses, discovering its flaws. The Corvani defense grid was impressive, but it relied on quantum communication networks that could be manipulated if you knew the right frequencies. Across Korvac Prime's orbital defenses, command systems began failing in cascade patterns. Weapon platforms turned their guns on each other. Shield generators overloaded and exploded. Defense drones spun out of control, crashing into the very installations they were meant to protect. In less than 20 minutes, the mightiest defensive network in Syndicate space had destroyed itself. On the planet's surface, panic spread through the capital city of Zekthara. Citizens who had spent their lives confident in their military superiority watched in horror as their protectors simply vanished from the sky. Emergency broadcasts filled the airwaves, contradictory orders from a government that no longer understood what was happening. High Commander Velkar, the Syndicate's new leader after Zextar's death, stood in the war room deep beneath the planetary government complex. Around him, his advisors argued and shouted, their voices creating a cacophony of desperation. The screens on the walls showed the same impossible sight, human ships maintaining perfect formation, while Corvani defenses collapsed without firing a shot. How is this possible? Velkar demanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. Our systems are impenetrable. His chief scientist, an elderly Corvani named Vekmer, studied the tactical displays with growing horror. Commander, they're not using brute force. They're using our own systems against us. This level of technological penetration should be impossible for such a young species. Then explain it. Velkar snarled. Vekmer's 4 eyes met his leader's gaze. I believe the humans have been studying us for far longer than we realized. Every raid we conducted, every ship we captured, every piece of technology we displayed. They were learning, preparing. The truth was even worse than Vekmer imagined. For 20 years, human intelligence had been infiltrating Syndicate space, mapping their networks, cataloging their weaknesses. While the Corvani had dismissed humanity as insignificant, human agents had been documenting every aspect of their civilization. The massacre at New Geneva hadn't been the start of the war. It had been the excuse to finish what was already planned out. As Korvac Prime's defenses crumbled, Admiral Kane opened a communication channel to the planet's surface. His image appeared on every screen, every display, every communication device across the world. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. People of Korvac Prime, he began, his tone as calm as if he were discussing the weather. I am Admiral Marcus Kane of the Human Defense Fleet. Your military has been neutralized. Your orbital defenses are gone. Your government's ability to resist has ended. Across the planet, billions of Corvani citizens stopped what they were doing to listen. In bars and homes, in offices and schools, Kane's words reached every corner of their world. Your leaders chose to murder innocent humans. They chose to ignore our warnings. They chose to continue their attacks even after we demonstrated our resolve. Now they will face the consequences of those choices. In the government bunker, Velkar watched his enemy's face and felt something his species had never truly experienced. Helplessness. "Open a channel," he ordered. "I want to speak with him." Moments later, Kane's image appeared on the bunker's main screen. Velkar stepped forward, drawing himself up to his full height, trying to project strength he no longer possessed. "Admiral Kane," he said, "I am High Commander Velkar. I speak for the Corvani Syndicate. We wish to discuss terms." Kane's expression didn't change. "Terms? Yes. Reparations for your losses. Withdrawal from human space. We can negotiate. No." The single word cut through Velkar's speech like a blade. Kane continued, his voice never rising, never showing anger or hatred. That made it somehow worse. "You had your chance for terms when we sent our ultimatum. You answered by murdering 3,000 more of our people. You had your chance for negotiation when your forces could have withdrawn. Instead, you chose to test our resolve." Velkar felt desperation creeping into his voice. "But surely some accommodation can be reached. The death of billions cannot serve any purpose." Kane was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, there was something in his eyes that made Velkar's blood run cold. "High Commander, do you remember what your predecessor said when our diplomats first protested your raids into human space? He said that mercy was a weakness, that soft species deserved extinction. He was right about one thing: mercy is a choice. And today, we choose not to make it." The transmission ended. Asterisk. Phase 2 began immediately. Human ships descended through Korvac Prime's atmosphere, their weapons targeting not military installations, but infrastructure. Power grids collapsed under precisely aimed energy strikes. Transportation networks simply stopped functioning. Communication arrays went dark one by one. This wasn't random destruction. It was surgical, calculated to produce maximum disruption with minimal immediate casualties. The humans weren't trying to kill every Corvani on the planet, not yet. They were demonstrating that they could do whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, and no force in the galaxy could stop them. Captain Sarah Chun, the officer who had first discovered the massacre at New Geneva, commanded one of the atmospheric assault ships. She looked down at the sprawling alien city below her. Vessel and felt no satisfaction, no joy in what they were doing. But she remembered the little girl with the braided hair. The toy spaceship clutched in small, dead fingers, and her finger never hesitated on the trigger. "Target acquired," her weapons officer reported. "Planetary communication hub. Residential area evacuated." "Fire," Sarah ordered. The building vanished in a column of superheated plasma, taking with it the Syndicate's ability to coordinate their remaining forces. Around the planet, similar strikes continued with mechanical precision. Within hours, Korvac Prime was effectively cut off from the galaxy, its people trapped on their own world, with no way to call for help. But help wouldn't have come anyway. Across Syndicate space, every military installation, every fleet base, every seat of government was under simultaneous attack. The silent fleet had divided into dozens of task forces, each one equipped with detailed intelligence about their targets. Worlds that had taken centuries to conquer fell in hours. The hegemony of Tau, longtime allies of the Syndicate, tried to send reinforcements. Their fleet of 200 ships never made it out of their home system. Human vessels appeared as if from nowhere, surrounding the Tau formation before they could react. The battle lasted 11 minutes. The Merchant Coalition attempted to negotiate safe passage for fleeing Syndicate officials, offering their services as neutral mediators. They received a response in the form of their entire trade fleet disappearing between star systems. No wreckage was ever found. As news of the systematic destruction spread, something unprecedented happened in galactic politics. Every major power simultaneously announced their neutrality in the human-Corvani conflict. The Altair Confederacy, the Nexus Alliance, even the militant Razor clans, All issued identical statements declaring they would not interfere in what was clearly a private matter between two species. Back on Korvac Prime, the end came not with massive explosions or orbital bombardment, but with something far more terrifying: silence. The human fleet simply waited in orbit, while the planet below slowly realized the scope of their situation. No food shipments arrived from off-world. No replacement parts for failing machinery came through the blockade. No communication with the outside galaxy was permitted. The Corvani, who had built their empire on conquest and tribute, discovered what it meant to be truly isolated. Days passed, then weeks. The great cities of Korvac Prime began to darken as power systems failed without maintenance. Food riots broke out in the residential sectors. The government's authority collapsed as local officials fled to underground bunkers or simply abandoned their posts. It was then that Admiral Kane made his final broadcast to the dying world. People of Korvac Prime, his voice echoed through empty streets and abandoned buildings. Your species spent 8 centuries teaching the galaxy that might makes right. You conquered worlds, enslaved populations, and destroyed civilizations that could not defend themselves. You taught us that mercy was weakness, that the strong survived by consuming the weak. On the surface, the few Corvani still listening, huddled around failing power sources, hanging on every word. Today, humanity is the strongest force in this region of space. By your own philosophy, by the very principles your empire was built upon, we have the right to do whatever we choose with you. You taught us this lesson. We learned it well. In the government bunker, Velkar listened with the last few officials, who hadn't fled or died. His species' proud civilization was crumbling around him, and he finally understood the magnitude of their error. But unlike your species, Kane continued, humanity chooses when to show mercy. We choose when to extend forgiveness. And we choose when to end conflicts with something other than extinction. For the first time in weeks, hope flickered in Corvani hearts. The surviving populations of former Syndicate worlds will be relocated to designated sectors under human oversight. You will be permitted to rebuild your societies under conditions that ensure you never again threaten innocent life. Your military capacity is permanently ended. Your government is dissolved. Your empire is finished. Kane paused, his next words carrying across the galaxy to every species that might be listening. But you will live. Your children will have a future. Because humanity, despite everything you have done, despite every atrocity you committed, chooses mercy, not because you deserve it, but because we choose to be better than you were. The broadcast ended, but its message resonated far beyond Korvac Prime. Across the galaxy, alien governments reassessed their relationships with humanity. Trade agreements were honored more carefully. Border disputes were settled through negotiation, rather than force. The quiet species from Earth had demonstrated something that shook the foundations of galactic politics. They had the power to destroy completely, but the wisdom to choose restraint. Years later, xenobiologists would study the human response to the Corvani aggression as a perfect example of their species' most dangerous characteristic: the ability to transform from peaceful explorers to ruthless warriors and back again, all while maintaining their moral center. The Corvani survivors, relocated to a single world under human supervision, would spend generations trying to understand how they had so completely misjudged their opponents. Their children would grow up learning human languages, studying human history, and gradually coming to appreciate the lesson their parents had learned too late. Admiral Kane retired quietly to a small farm on Earth, his fleet disbanded, his weapons decommissioned. When asked by historians about the war, he would only say that humanity had done what was necessary to protect itself, and that he hoped such measures would never be required again. Captain Sarah Chun returned to exploration, mapping new systems and making first contact with species that had heard the stories of the Corvani War. These aliens approached humanity with a mixture of respect and fear, uncertain whether they were meeting explorers or conquerors. Sarah always made the same speech at these encounters. We are explorers first, defenders second, and warriors only when we have no choice. The choice is yours to make. The galaxy had learned its lesson. The quiet species from Earth had spoken, and their words would be remembered for millennia. Humanity's mercy was a gift, not a weakness. Their restraint was chosen, not compelled, and their patience, while vast, was not infinite. In the end, the Corvani Syndicate's greatest achievement was not the empire they built, but the teacher they became. They had shown the galaxy what happened when you mistook human kindness for human weakness. The lesson was written in fire across a dozen worlds, and no species would ever forget it. Humanity had drawn a line in the stars. Cross it they had, warned, and faced the consequences. The Corvani had crossed that line, and they had paid the ultimate price, not death, but the complete destruction of everything they thought they were. The empire was gone, the threat was ended, and the galaxy was at peace, watching the quiet species from Earth with new eyes and deeper understanding. The war was over. The lesson would last forever. Asterisk.